So today we're going to be talking about some leading tone chords and voice leading chords that don't fit nicely into many of the other categories that I've talked about. So we're just going to add some discussion about how 4/2 chords, which are going to be your third inversion chords, can be used in tonal music. So the leading tone chord is one of your dominant substitutes. It's typically going to be found in first inversion. And just like with the 4 and its substitute, the 2 chord, the 2 chord is often found in first inversion. And what that does is in the case of the leading tone chord, it de-emphasizes that tritone that would occur if the diminished triad was put in root position. So if you think about the key of C, your leading tone chord is going to be the 7th scale degree, so B, D, and F. So that's a diminished triad. Between that root and the 5th, you have a tritone. If you then put that in first inversion, so the D's in the bass, it's a D and an F, and you can hide the B-F relationship. It's still a tritone, it's still there, but you can hide it in the inner voices. When you have it between the root and any other voice, it really becomes prominent. So typically you're going to see that leading tone chord in first inversion. As I've sort of said already, they can be used as a weakened substitute for the 5 chord. So the 5 chord is going to be your stronger chord. That means your leading tone chord may be used at the end of a weak antecedent phrase or some other phrase where the composer wants to make it feel like the piece needs to go on, but also wants to give a conclusion to a particular melody or phrase. Stepwise voice leading is going to be preferred. This stepwise voice leading, anytime we use it, it provides strength, it provides a way to gently walk past those dissonances. So when you use stepwise voice leading, it allows you to strengthen the weakened leading tone chord. And they're typically used to expand the tonic area, just like a 5 chord. You're not typically going to see them in a dominant area, unless, again, it's the end of a really weak antecedent phrase. So how do you resolve your leading tone triads? So the tritone must be resolved properly. So that's going to be your diminished 5th, your augmented 4th. Remember, the diminished 5th has to come inward to a 3rd. Augmented 4th goes outward to a 6th. But there is an exception. It may move inward to a perfect 4th also. So I'm going to show you all these examples. There's also a parallel 10th exception, which we will talk about, and that's where the diminished 5th resolves up by step if soprano-bass 10ths occur. So let's go over each one of these. So here you have your 7 chord. It's B, D, F, and then the 5th is doubled. And what's happening here is you have the tritone here between the B and the F in the outer voices. So you want to resolve that inwards. Everything else just resolves down by step. So you've already got a C and an E here, so in order to make a complete triad, we had to have a G here. So this is a very simple way to resolve this particular leading tone chord. The next one essentially does the same thing. In fact, it's just a different voicing. So here we have a diminished 5th. Here we have an augmented 4th. So notice the augmented 4th, it's still resolving to a C. This B is still going to C, just like B is going to C. And the F is still coming down to E, so this F is coming down to E. But the difference is it creates an interval of a 6. So that's why your diminished 5th resolves inward and your augmented 4th resolves outward. It's not that they have special resolutions, it's that when you follow the natural tendency of these notes to resolve, they tend to resolve in the same way. But when you're going from a diminished 5th, it closes in. When you're going from augmented 4th, it opens up. Here's an example of an augmented 4th in the outer voices. So the F and the B here, you've got your augmented 4th, and it resolves up to a perfect 5th. So this is an exception that is allowed because moving into that perfect 5th, the perfect 4th, tends to lessen the effect of the dissonance, and it's in the inner voices, so it's less likely that we're going to hear it. Also, because this voice leading is just moving stepwise, and all 3 upper voices moving stepwise, and then we have a nice contrary motion in the bass, it's allowed. So just make sure you have complete chords. So notice here, you've got your B, your D, and your F. So in this case, we doubled the third. That's a typical doubling for a diminished triad, where you double the third. But then here, when we go to our one chord, we already have a C. If these move into a fourth, you double the C, and you get a fifth. So in order to actually give us a quality, we need to put that E in there. So as long as you move from a augmented fourth to a perfect fourth, and you have complete chords, and you double the third for the 7 chord, you should be fine for resolving these. Here's another example. This is soprano and bass tenth. So we have a D and an F. So that is actually the interval of a tenth. And it's the same thing that we did with our dominant triads. When the fourth scale degree didn't resolve down, it actually resolved up. It was because of soprano-bass tenths. So you're allowed to do that with the leading tone chord as well. So what you want to do here, notice you've got your B, your D, your third is doubled again because it's in first inversion. We like to do that. It helps to reduce the effect of that tritone when you double the third. And then you have your dissonance between, in this case, the tenor and the soprano. So as long as the bass and the soprano are moving in tenths, then you can get away without having this F resolve down to where it normally would, which would be an E. So what I recommend, and what I did when I was an undergraduate, is with all these chord progressions, I wrote them in every single key, and I wrote them in many different voicings, and I played them on the piano. And then once I could play them on the piano, I heard them internally. I memorized what they sounded like, so that you can get a really good feel for what's going on here. And what this does is it doesn't make you mindlessly follow the path of composers of the past. What it actually does is it trains your brain to start to hear harmony, so that you can compose internally and you don't have to go to a notation program. So that's my little rant, but if you can develop your ear, you're going to be a much happier, much more efficient, and much more thoughtful composer. There's just nothing like being able to sit there and actually go through compositions internally without having to play with a piano or any other device. It's only really in the modern era where composers have resorted to using notation programs as a substitute for a real development of musical skills. And it goes for performers too. Performers need the ability to look at a score and hear what's going on to get the full, experience. That's my belief anyway. So resolving leading tone sevenths. It's just like everything else that we do. Another way to think of this, I showed you the resolutions, but your leading tone resolves up and the seventh resolves down. So here you've got your B and the bass. Notice this, all three of these are in root position. So in this case, we have our B and our A flat. That 7, it just comes down. And then notice the leading tone. The B, which will be the bass, just resolves up. So we have the notes B, D, F, and A flat. This is different from resolving the 5 chord, or the 5-7 to 1. With 5-7 to 1, you have to leave out a chord member, which would be the 5th. Here you can include all 4 chord members. So here, if you look at the 1 chord, we got a C, C in the soprano, and you have an E and a G. So you have a complete 1 chord as well, with your standard root doubling. This is a half diminished 7th. It doesn't really change what's going on. Notice the F still comes down to E, F still comes down to the E, and your A natural still comes down. The 7th still resolves down. So also notice between the bass here, you've got your diminished 5th, that resolves inward to a 3rd. Same with here. You've got to follow these standard resolutions. They just create the strongest pull, and they help to limit the weaknesses of the 7 chord. Here's another diminished 5th. It resolves inward, and notice here the A flat just comes down. Notice in this case we've got a C and an E. The E is actually doubled. So we do that in order to have this proper resolution. Same with here. The 3rd was actually doubled. So you'll notice that in certain cases you may end up doubling the 3rd on the 1 chord, and that's going to be okay with your leading tone 7 chords. Inversions. So your fully diminished will occur most often when you see an inversion. You want to double the root or third of the one chord. Either option can work. The leading tone must resolve up. That rule will always pretty much stay the same. The seventh will resolve down, and just double the root of the third or one chord. So here, let's look at this. We've got our B, the third is in the bass, it makes it a 6-5. So B, D, there's our F, and our A. So our seventh is coming down, leading tone going up. In this case, we doubled the third. You wouldn't want to double the fifth in this case, because that would just create too much parallel motion and sound a little awkward. So it's best to double the third, or you can double the root. But in this case, if you want to double the root, this F would have to jump down to a C, and that wouldn't be great voice leading. So here's an example where we actually do double the root when it's in a 1-6. So here's your 4-3. That's going to be your second inversion, and the fifth is in the bass. So you got your B, your D, your F, and your A. Notice it's a complete chord again. And it just resolves down. Everything moves in stepwise motion. The leading tone goes up, the seventh comes down, double the root here. This is an option for you to double the root. Here is another example of a fully diminished 6-5. So that's going to be, again, D's in the bass, a third's in the bass. A flat just comes down, leading tone goes up. It's identical. The only difference is we made that a B flat to make it fully diminished. And here is our last one. We've got a B, a D, an F, and an A flat. So this is where you get the seventh in the bass. The fifth in the bass. So that fifth just comes down, and then your leading tone still comes down. Your seventh comes down, and your leading tone goes up. And here again, we double the root. So it's just showing you your 6-5 and your 4-3, where you double the third, how that looks, and then the 6-5 and the 4-3 when you actually end up doubling the root, at least in this case. Yeah, so these ones here, these ones here are the thirds, these ones here are the fifths, but you can probably pretty clearly see that when you actually look at the chords. So here we have some voice exchanges and soprano-bass tense. Take a moment, pause it, see if you can identify the soprano-bass tense and the voice exchanges. Now, of course, some of them are marked in 96, 97, 98. And I also told you 94, 96, 97 is a voice exchange. But take a moment and figure out where the other soprano-bass tense actually occur. Okay? It's kind of a process of elimination. If you need to pause it, pause it. If not, we're going to go on. So I'm going to go through these step by step. So here's a voice exchange. Your G is exchanging with the G. Your E is exchanging with the E. We still have the leading tone resolving up. You still have your D, your third is doubled. Your fifth is doubled. Your B is here in an inner voice, which diminishes the sound of that augmented fourth. And we have a complete chord for the 1-6. And notice everything's moving stepwise. Here, this is an example of soprano-bass tense. So we've got C, D, E here, E, F, G. So the C and the E are a tenth apart, D and F are a tenth apart, E and G are a tenth apart. Notice that the leading tone still resolves up, but this results in a doubled third when you have the soprano-bass tense. So here again, we've got a voice exchange, a C exchange with the C, E with the E. Another voice exchange, E with the E, C with the C. Leading tones resolving up, leading tones resolving up. Everything else is stepwise. And then here's another example of a soprano-bass tense, which looks very similar to 95, but it just shows you another voicing that you could use. So here, we're just moving up in thirds in the outer voices, so C and E, D and F, and E and G. And then the leading tone goes up, so this just kind of rocks back and forth. And then here, we end up just moving down, and again, we double the third. So these are some of the examples for how you could actually have a voice exchange or a soprano-bass tense for your leading tone chords. If you had the dominant, the F would resolve up normally. So that's just shown right here. F is resolving up. Okay? You're not going to see these leading tone chords too commonly like that, but they can definitely be used as part of an expansion. So your leading tone 4-2 to cadential 6-4. This is sort of a special case, and some theory textbooks will talk about it. Others, it will just sort of be implied. But the third inversion leading tone 7th chord is most commonly found in conjunction with a cadential 6-4. So this 7th chord right here, your 7-4-2, your 7th is going to be in the bass. And what typically happens is the third inversion chord usually goes straight to a cadential 6-4. So you get your 7, then you get your 1-6-4. This creates a lot of instability, but notice the really smooth voice leading, the stepwise voice leading. And then all of this is just moving by step. This allows for a really powerful intensification of the dominant here. And so when we have the leading tone chord in such an unstable position as the third inversion, it tends to go to an even more unstable cadential 6-4 before actually resolving. So how can you use these voice leading 4-2 chords? They can be used to expand the tonic area. They can be called either a pedal 2-4-2 or a neighboring 2-4-2. So just like our pedal 6-4s, they can be called pedal or neighboring. Either one's fine. It's really what feature is more prominent, or if you just prefer to call one pedal or neighboring, you can go that route as well. The neighbor tones in the upper three parts move against the bass. So notice this pedal point here in this particular example. We've got a 1 going to a 2-4-2, going to a 1 chord. So this is another example of a 4-2 chord. And the voice leading just allows everything to move contrary. So the top three voices are just moving up and then coming down. It's very simple. You build your 1 chord just like the pedal 6-4, you move up by step, and you come down. That's where you get your neighboring motion. So this is why if you view it from the bass perspective, in most cases it's going to be a pedal 6-4. If you view it from a neighboring motion, then it's the other three voices. You might want to call it a neighboring 2-4-2. So again, just like with the 7-4-2, it can be combined here with another chord. So here's a 5-6-5. And this kind of acts as an intermediary before it resolves to the 1 chord. So it could be interspersed with a dominant. So here we get a tonic, predominant, dominant, and tonic closure possibly, depending on the actual melody, which we don't have, so we don't know. But notice here, we're still using this contrary, similar motion in the upper three voices. The bass stays the same, and then you would resolve it over to the 1 chord here, and then you just hold over the common tone in the 2 voices where there's a common tone, and then everything else just moves by steps. So this allows for a nice smooth transition from that 1 chord into the 2-4-2 and then back to the 1, while still allowing for a dominant as well. And you may see this fairly commonly in music. This isn't something you really need to know how to write. This isn't something that I personally I've written out in every key, but it is something that you want to be familiar with it because you may see it as a predominant, dominant, tonic expansion like you see right here. So really there's 2 ways it can be used, either as a tonic pedal or the predominant, dominant, tonic expansion. So I hope this was helpful for you. We're going to get into some more topics next time, so look forward to that.